Nuestro mundo ahora es muy difícil para tener fe, porque hay muchas cosas contra nuestra fe en nuestro mundo. Escuchamos en nuestro evangelio de hoy una oportunidad por los discípulos para practicar su fe, pero últimamente they failed. They had fear in their lives. And though they had seen all of these great things that Jesus had done, they didn't believe enough in faith. Is your faith stronger than the fear that you have in the world? Or does your fear dictate how you live? In a second reading from St. Paul to the Corinthians, he tells us that the love of Christ impels us. It sends us forward. It sends us out. It changes us. That we are no longer just sinners, pero somos, después de nuestros bautismos, en realidad, hijos adoptivos de Dios. Hijos de Dios. Y este facto necesita cambiar nuestras acciones y cambiar nuestros corazones contra el pecado y con el amor de Dios para cambiar nuestro mundo, pero primero para cambiar nuestros corazones y nuestras familias. Es posible, pero con demasiado miedo no es posible. Necesitamos invitar el amor de Dios entre cada parte de nuestras vidas. Si hay cosas naturales con miedo, if you hear a big thunderstorm and you're not paying attention, sí, es natural. There's sometimes when we get caught off guard and we are fearful. That's okay. But that's not the fear that the Lord is speaking of in today's gospel. He's telling us to know with our faith the love of God. And to be sure in our faith that we know who it is God is. Because again, these apostles had witnessed all of these miracles, and yet they go to Jesus and say, "Hey man, we're dying, don't you care?" Basically, in modern day translations, what he would say. Don't you care that we're about to die? Oh, ye of little faith. Is your faith not active yet? Have you not accepted it yet? Have you not put it to practice yet? It's really the question that Christ is asking the disciples and the apostles in today's gospel. Y es la misma pregunta por nosotros. Si tienes fe, ¿por qué no practicas su fe? ¿Por qué vives con miedo, no con su fe? Why do you allow fear to dictate your actions instead of your faith? That is that gift given to us originally in our baptisms. That indelible mark that cannot be erased. That we are baptized in el nombre del Padre, del Hijo, y del Espíritu Santo. That there's nothing in this world, unless we allow it to, that can dictate our actions for us. It's a hard lesson I had to learn as a child. Being the second oldest of 5 kids, you get lost in the shuffle sometimes. And for me, I got picked on a lot in school. And so I'd always come home, "Man, Dad, these kids made me make these bad decisions." To which my dad would always respond, "Nobody can make you do anything." "Well, yes, when they say this, when they do this, this is how I have to respond." Or do you have to respond that way? Or do you choose to respond that way? Well, telling that to an 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid, it's the same thing. But as an adult, when we look back on our childhood, we can see what my dad was trying to tell me is the same thing that Christ is trying to tell us in the gospel today. Be in control of your actions. Nobody can make you do anything that you aren't willing to do. That fear can't dictate our actions, but learned actions, habits, which are either vices, bad habits, or virtues, good habits, can help lead us towards how we react or we respond when something like being in a boat and almost capsizing happens to us. That's when Christ comes to them and says, do you still not have faith? He's been trying to instill in them this positive habit. To see is to believe. But then he reminds us later in the gospel, blessed are those who will not see and still believe. Because for many of us, when we look at the apostles, when we look at the disciples, we look back and say, man, how were they just so slow? They saw him raise a man from the dead. They saw him raise a child from her deathbed. They saw him heal the leper. They saw him cleanse all of these great things. And yet, every single one of them abandoned him in his hour of need. I would never have done that. That's pride speaking. But many times we fall into that trap. Oh, man. If I were there in Jesus' time, all I need to do is see him that one time. That'll change my whole life. That's Satan speaking in our lives, convincing us that all we need is just that one thing. No, because we're humans, we're slow. We don't always get it the first time or the second time. Parents, how many times do you ask your kids to pick up their clothes, to make their beds, to brush their teeth, to take a shower, boys? You laugh because you know it's true. And yet, you still love your kids, right? You may not always like them, but you love your kids. Whether they're obedient or not the first time, the second time, or the 15 millionth time, you love them. Kids, how many times have your parents asked you to do those things, and out of love you said, yes, mother, sí, madre, sí, padre, and then you don't do it anyways? Do you have such little faith that your parents won't ground you? Or usa un chancla? Somos humanos. We don't always get it the first time or the second time, or as the disciples, the 15 millionth time. But yet, God never gives up on us. So when he saw the disciples at fear, he looks out at the sea and the winds and says, be quiet, be still. Some of the hardest things for us as adults to do, we never learned as children. We never learned the value of silence. All we learned was shh, shh. We didn't learn why. We just learned that making noise is a bad thing. Well, it's not. In the right place, making noise is a great thing. But also in other times, we are called, as Christ calls the wind and the waves today, to be quiet and to be still. You know, it amazes me looking out at our congregation this evening, because I counted before Mass started. There's 45 of us in here and 24 kids. How many times is the number one complaint about bringing your kids to Mass, they're too loud, they're too distracting? Now, some of you guys are doing things that are driving me crazy, but you're here. I'm glad you're here. Mom and Dad, thank you for bringing your kids here to Mass. Aunts and uncles, grandparents, thank you for bringing the little ones to Mass. But but also remember their kids. You think you get distracted easily? They grew up with an iPad in their hands. They grew up in a world of distraction that our generations will never understand. And yet, look at how well behaved they are this evening. Some nights they aren't, so I understand that. But our children are a blessing to us. And so it's important that we bring them to church. It's also important that we pray with them outside of church. And that we let them know that we love them in church and outside of church. Not just to punish them, but instead to love them. You know, it's always kind of funny as a priest, you never know which things that you say people will listen to. And every once in a while, I'll get a text message or an email or a phone call. Father, you will not believe what my kid said to me after Mass. He regurgitated your homily to me. It's like, that's awesome. Which part of it? What, were they actually paying attention, or did they interpret it differently? So I'm looking back in the cry room today, and we've got the 4 boys back there, and they're listening to some of the homily. Because I saw one of them look over to the other one and go, shh. And many times in our lives, we get some parts of the gospel, and we miss out on others. And so we seek to grow and learn in our faith, a little bit at a time. So what is keeping you this day from embracing your faith? Invite God into that fear and invite God into that distraction and let it go. As you let your children go after they graduate high school, as they leave the nest for the first time, unless they come back like Rosa. But still, you were let go, and you came back with Mom to Mass. It's an important thing. Because just because we are adults doesn't mean that family time is any different. My family, every Sunday, we do a rosary together across the nation. Every Sunday at 7 o'clock via Zoom. My brother is in Florida. He joins in. My mom and sister are in Oklahoma City in my mom's house. They join in. My other brother and sister are up in Edmond. They join in. My aunt and my uncle, until he died last week, they joined in from Southern California. It's easy to make an excuse. Oh, well, there's no way to get us together. And then COVID, what did it do? It brought us closer together than we could ever think. It took away our excuses and allows us to pray with and for each other. Because no matter where you go, you will always be the children of your parents and the brothers and sisters of your brothers and sisters and the sons and daughters of your mothers and fathers and the parents of your children as well. That though they may not always like each other, you may not always like each other, you're all loved by God. And that love of Christ calls us to be more, to do more, because it offers us faith in a world that has so much violence, that seeks to destroy us by so much fear. The message of Christ has never changed. And his message is simply 3 words in English and 2 words in Spanish. Te amo. I love you. May that be sufficient for us. May we allow it to dispel the fear from our hearts and allow us to go forward to proclaim the good news of Christ.